Lily Hewitson there. Well, we were using Lily's interviews there, very interesting as they may have been, but just to try and fill in some technical gaps, because we had been hoping to speak, and I think we now can speak to Pen Farthing, who is in Kabul, joins us from Kabul tonight, nearly midnight there, former Marine, but who has been working with an animal charity for some years to great acclaim there, but a little earlier today tweeted, well, what I can only describe as a hugely anguished tweet about the fact that his wife... Well, look, I tell you what, Pen Farthing, you explain the story. You'll do it better than I possibly could. What's happened to your wife and your volunteers and your charity workers, I should say?
Well, we're here in Kabul. Obviously, we're part of this evacuation plan for my expats, I should say, not for my Afghan staff. And my wife, she's Norwegian, and my country manager, she's American. She's actually also 32 weeks pregnant. And they got the call from their relevant embassies that there was an evac flight for them at Kabul airport. And I'd like to stress that because a few other news agencies have been reporting that they just tried to make their way to the airport. They didn't. Their foreign ministries told them to get themselves to the airport because there was an evac flight tonight. So they made their way there. They got to the gate of North Kabul Airport, and the scene was just utter chaos. They tried to turn around, they couldn't. They got caught in the throng of people who were desperately trying to get to the one gate, and sadly they ended up being crushed against all the people that were just pushing to get to the gate, waving their passports up in the air. And the soldiers on the other side of the gate, these are British and American soldiers, would not do anything to stop the crush, to let people in. And instead, people started shooting up in the air to try and scare the people away who were crushing against the gate. I was on the phone at the time to the Quick Reaction Force on the other side of the gate, telling them to let in the expats who had stood there, who'd been told to get to the airport. They wouldn't open the gate. They wouldn't go out to prevent people from being injured. I'm absolutely appalled with those members of the armed forces who wouldn't go out. That was what they were there to do, was to protect the expats. And having served for 22 years as a Royal Marine Commando, I'm actually appalled at those ranks today who would not go out to actually do their job. My wife and my country manager managed to pull away from the gate, get themselves off to the edge of the just throng of desperate people, and then get out of there. They tried another secure location which you can stay at to go when you go into the airport. They couldn't get in there. They were turned away by British soldiers who wouldn't come out and get them from the Taliban checkpoint that is in front of that secure location. So they ended up having to drive across the city at night to finally get back to a safe location. If anybody in the British government or in the American government, and I'm directing this right now at the Biden administration, says Kabul airport is safe and secure, then they seriously sack their intel officers and actually look at what is happening on the ground right now. You cannot get into Kabul airport safely.
Pen Farthing, presumably that was, we're not blaming individual soldiers, are we? We're saying they must have had rules of engagement that they were obeying.
But then why were they there? Why are they there? They're not engaging anybody. They had to go out and bring in those people who actually had a reason to be there, or actually send out messages to the people they're told to be there not to come there because it was too dangerous.
Yeah.
Just stand. They stood there and watched from the top of the wall. They stood there and watched from the top of the wall. I'm absolutely... But this whole thing, the last few days, I've been appalled by what is happening here in Afghanistan. Not only have we let down the Afghan people with this absolutely disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, we now can't even get the withdrawal right. Whoever is planning this, whoever has decided this is how we're going to get people out, needs to resign or be sacked today, and he actually gets somebody in who can actually properly get people out of Afghanistan safely. I've heard tomorrow, I listened to the press briefing in the White House, that they are going to attempt to get 9,000 people out a day from Kabul airport. 9,000 people, along with the 2,000 from Britain. How are you going to get 11,000 people through a gate more or less the size of a garage door? And this is also along with all the thousands of desperate Afghans who are trying to escape the Taliban.
Farthing, sorry to interrupt. Do you know where your wife and your country manager are now? Do you know when? I mean, they're in a safe location. Do you know when they will get a flight out of Kabul?
This is the other thing, and I'm laughing because I'm now numb. If we'd have done this interview earlier today, you'd have probably cut me off because of my language. So they never turned up for their flight tonight because obviously they couldn't get into Kabul airport. Do you think they've even had an email from either of their foreign ministries asking them, are they safe because they never turned up for their flight? No, they haven't. There is no coordination. Nobody knows who's getting on these flights. It's basically, how many people do you get through the door? We stick them on an aeroplane. This is not how you do an orderly withdrawal from a country. This is a chaotic, absolutely chaotic hot mess. And I would like to ask both governments, the British and the Americans, and in fact the Norwegians as well, because they haven't asked my wife where she is. Not once tonight. She's now in a safe location, not with me, because she can't get back here. But not a single person has asked her where she is, and it's your right, she never made her flight. Yeah. This is an absolute disaster. People need to step up to the plate, admit that we have got this completely wrong, and now put in power the assets we need to get people out safely. Actually, maybe, and I hate to say this as a former Marine who lost 2 of my young Marines in Helmand back in 2006, but maybe even just talk to the Taliban and get this sorted. They're in charge of this country now.
They are in charge. They are now in charge. That's indisputable. Pen Farthing, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it there. We really appreciate your time tonight. We wish you all the best, and your wife and your country manager as well. Pen Farthing joining us there from Kabul.